And Ms. Bagnolo, come up and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please. You can come up here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ladies. Mrs. Kraus, please read the statement of public notice.
Take notice that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in accordance with NJSA 10:4-10 as follows. The notice of the meeting was prominently posted on the bulletin board at the municipal building located at 225 Main Street, Little Falls, New Jersey on January 2nd, 2018. A copy of the notice was faxed to the North Jersey Herald and News and the Record on the same date. Additionally, a copy of the notice was fact-filed in the office of the Township Clerk on said date.
Mrs. Kraus, please call the roll.
Councilmember Cordner?
Present.
Councilmember Lees?
Here.
Councilmember Sieber,
Present.
Councilmember Vanchieri?
Present.
Council President Scoba.
Present. Mayor?
Thank you, Council President. As everyone can see by looking around this evening, Little Falls has had a great deal of success with its student athletes. And just over these past couple of months, there have been a lot of victories celebrated here in Little Falls. And tonight, we want to honor and recognize everybody that has really made this incredible accomplishment of defeating multiple teams over the course of the year. But this very first one happens to not be a team sport. This very first one is an individual who competed at a state-sanctioned gymnastics competition and placed incredibly well in her competition. And I'm going to ask that Harper join me up here as we recognize her this evening. So we have a proclamation for Harper, and I'd like to read it to everyone. It says, whereas Harper competed in the U.S. Gymnastics-sanctioned state gymnastics meet at Morris County College, and whereas she competed against 48 other 8-year-old girls in the state of New Jersey, and whereas she placed first in bars and was declared USAG NJ Excel Bronze Bar State Champion, and whereas the Township of Little Falls would like to recognize and celebrate Harper's success. Now it is fitting and proper that I, James Belford Damiano, Mayor of the Township of Little Falls, extend congratulations, best wishes, and continued success to Harper. Congratulations. All right, we have might die again, but that's okay. We now have our LFAC 3rd and 4th grade girls basketball team that I'm going to call up here as soon as I read a proclamation for all of them. Whereas the Township of Little Falls celebrates the LFAC 3rd and 4th grade girls basketball team and their triumphant championship win. And whereas the team went into 3 overtimes during the game and displayed amazing sportsmanship along with their opponents from Woodland Park, who all agreed to share the title. Now it is fitting and proper that I, James Belford Damiano, Mayor of the Township of Little Falls, extend congratulations, best wishes, and continued success to the LFAC 3rd and 4th grade girls basketball team. And I'm going to call each of their names and ask that they join me up here if they're here this evening. First, we have Lily Almendinger. We have Gabriella Bagnola. We have Shad Al-Shmama. Diana Hamden. We we have Lindsay Russo. Gabriella Santiago. Kelsey Smith. And with Alex St. Ledger. And I'm going to ask that our coaches, Bill Smith and Mike Russo, join me.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. Got it.
All right, we also had a successful year for our 5th and 6th grade girls basketball teams here. And I'm going to provide a proclamation for them and ask that all of those players join me up here. Whereas the Township of Little Falls celebrates the LFAC 5th and 6th grade girls basketball team and a triumphant championship win. And whereas the team was undefeated and they dominated their league. And now it is fitting and proper that I, James Belford Damiano, Mayor of the Township of Little Falls, extend congratulations, best wishes, and continued success to the LFAC 5th and 6th grade girls basketball team. And the first player I'm going to ask to have join me up here is Grace Transfield. We have Mia Levin. Maddie Powell. Madison Reardon. We have Ashley Larina. We have Jenna Fontana. And Alina Ajini. And I'm going to ask the coaches, Mark McTowell, Ron Levin, and Chris Reardon to join me here. All right, we also had a big win this year from our LFAC Cool Wellness Purple Cobras team. And I'm asked that they join me up here. Whereas the Township of Little Falls celebrates the LFAC Core Wellness Purple Cobras triumphant win of the 2017 North Jersey Rec Soccer League's 7th and 8th grade girls championship. And whereas the Purple Cobras had a perfect season, winning over teams from Woodland Park, Totowa, and Wayne. And now it is fitting and proper that I, James Belford Damiano, Mayor of the Township of Little Falls, extend congratulations, best wishes, and continued success to the LFAC Core Wellness Purple Cobras. And I'm asked that the following players join me up here. Amanda Fasciolo. Celia Martino. A lot of vacations this week. Julie Horsey. Nicole LaRicca. Tiana Raymond. Tavia Mustafa. We to Angelina Perez. No. Danielle Montevera. Juliana Campagna. Sophia Garage. Victoria Collins. Ariana Flores Ortiz. Gabriela Rufina. Julianne Swain. Sophia Cavello. This one, last one, I know she's here, I see her in the back, Gabrielle Grimer. And I'm going to ask our coaches to join me up here for this big group photo. We have head coach Diana Granda and our assistant coach Priscilla Campagna. Come on.
Ready. Bring out 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I'm good. Get that one.
Good luck in your round. All right, and finally we have our LFAC 5th and 6th grade boys basketball team. Whereas the Township of Little Falls celebrates the LFAC 5th and 6th grade boys basketball team and their triumphant championship win. And whereas the team came back from a 20-point deficit to win. And now it's fitting and proper that I, James Belford Damiano, Mayor of the Township of Little Falls, extend congratulations, best wishes, and continued success to the LFAC 5th and 6th grade boys basketball team. And we're asking this player to join me if they're here. We have Kareem El Savani. Henry Hayes. Nick Cairo. Jake Delaney. There we go. Jake Nunez. Jane Payne. We have Eric Almondale. And Brandon Grout. And some of our coaches, Jim Madonia, Nick Madonia, and Tim Delaney.
Guys ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3.
All right, that wraps up the last couple of months' victories here at Little Falls. Everyone is welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you'd like, or you can head out to the hallway, take some group photos if you'd like, and feel free to join us if you'd like, or you can head home after, whatever you decide.
You can't leave.
I can, but technically.
Oh, that, yeah. Yeah, but yeah.
That's weird. Well, I asked before, but I shouldn't. I mean, all your files are on.
So I read it Friday, and then
I'm gonna have to pull Nelson.
You gotta
Picture of that really quick.
print some of these things out.
I'm gonna send it to him right now.
I'll text you all the pictures so you have them. Somebody hand me free. We're just not there yet.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I have a motion and a second to open to the public comment for general matters only? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Motion?
Okay.
So moved?
Can I say that? Have a motion? I didn't say it?
You did, but nobody said anything.
All right, let's try it again. Can I have a motion and a second to open for public comment for general matters only?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Mrs. Kraus?
Anyone wishing to address the Township Council may do so through the Council President. Please give your name and address for the record. Comments are to be limited to 3 minutes. However, if appropriate, you may be granted additional time in the sole discretion of the Council President.
The floor is open.
Hi, how are you? My name is Janet Sherman. I live on Woods Road.
I'm sorry, can you just bring the mic up because we're being recorded?
I thought I had a loud enough voice. My name is Janet Sherman. I live on Woods Road. I wanted to see if it ever even be a thought through the town if you guys would think about speed bumps. I have to tell you, we had one house on our street that was being rented to college kids. And our whole neighborhood blamed it on the college kids, that everybody's whizzing up and down the street. I mean, like lightning speed. As soon as they hit the one bend, they nail it. They get to the bottom of the hill, or, you know, coming back up. As soon as it levels off, they nail the gas again. I have my granddaughter there, and we seem to have a problem. It's no longer the college kids. It's people that live there. And something needs to be done. Either that or sit a patrol car there 24 hours a day, but it's really out of control. I happen to have a big mouth, and I happen to say something to a couple people, and I was told that they own the street. So I don't know where to go from there, but it's a really big problem. I'm not kidding you. I mean, it's not, even if they went 35, but I'm telling you, they nail it so quick that you can't even make out who's in the car. So that's my biggest grief.
Does the council have any questions?
I mean, I'll jump in. I know we've talked a few times, and I even sent the information for Corporal Mancato, because the one thing that we've been doing with the police department is to look at social media and other complaints that come in from residents and come up with a strategy how to best to address. And the one thing we can do is, I know the chief's not here tonight, but I can reach out to him as well as Lieutenant Briggs and Corporal Mancato to see if we can look into your street and maybe have a presence, because what we've seen lately is some of the officers have been stationed on certain streets where there's been a high volume of traffic and speeding to address it. And what we're finding too is it's a mix of out-of-towners, but it's also residents that are doing it as well.
Yeah, it's definitely residents. I mean, our street, the way the back end of our street is, it's a rare occasion that somebody uses that as a cut through. You know, it's half of it is dirt back there and a pretty good slope. But it's, I had brought this up years ago, probably before anybody was on the board here, and I was told that they didn't want to do that because of the plows. but that was, I want to say, probably.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last comment?
I was told that they didn't want to put speed humps or anything like that because of the plows. But that's a long time ago. Hopefully, things have changed, and you know, our kids' safety has to be a priority.
Does the council have any other questions or comments? Mayor, do you have any questions or comments?
Council President, yeah, one thing that we have been getting a number of comments about lately is speed on various streets. And fortunately or unfortunately, the municipality does own 2 boxes that perform speed studies that are somewhat, they go somewhat unnoticed, and that's sort of the purpose of performing a speed study. You don't want people to know that it's actually occurring, to catch real data. The issue is we only have one that works well and a second one that works mediocre. You know, it's mediocre when it is used. But what we can do is add Woods Road to the list of roadways in which we will do a study. I've been speaking to the chief about this, as well as our lieutenant and our traffic officer. We will add Woods Road to the list. I don't know the exact time frame or how many streets are left to have done now. Generally, we can get a street done about 1 street per week with good data. We can install the box there for a period of 3, 4, 5 days, depending how long the battery.
The neon sign says.
No,
Oh.
those do
I'm
it,
willing to even have
but
to
those
put that on my
are
yard.
those are not so inconspicuous. The ones that we have go extremely unnoticed. And it gives us data down to the minute that cars were driving, to within very close proximity of time the car was driving there, the exact speed of the car, the time of day that there is an issue or is not an issue. And what we found is that, and this might not be the case on Woods Road, but we find a lot of times is that speeding may be an issue with one particular car or 2 cars over the course of a day, generally at about the same time, either when they're leaving to go to work or coming home.
Right.
And it's much easier than efficiently put the police officers on the street at around that time over a particular, period, during whatever days of the week we notice it, and we can more efficiently utilize our police resources to attempt to address the issue. So we will add that Woods Road to the list of streets to perform the study. Again, I don't know exactly when it will occur. When it does, we're willing to, and I know the chief has in the past, met with residents who have, lodged the complaints. Sometimes, and again, this may not apply to you or on Woods Road, but sometimes it's more of a perception issue, which I can completely understand.
Right.
When it's your house and a car drives by at 30, sometimes you feel as though, the car was flying by, versus when you're on another road and it's you driving and you're actually...
Right. It's quieter street.
Correct. And sometimes it becomes a perception issue, but there may be a time of day where there's a number of individuals speeding, and the police will address that. And the reports that these speed tests produce are somewhat incredible to efficiently
Could be
deploy
as
the
simple
police.
as one ticket could stop them,
Absolutely.
so, okay.
So we will add Woods Road, though,
I
absolutely.
appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments this evening. They don't go unnoticed, and we'll follow up. Thank you. The floor is still open.
Louis Fernandez, Harrison Street.
Can you please give us the number, Mr. Fernandez?
It's the same as last week, 54.
Thank you, sir.
I hope you allow me 2 or 3 minutes to get something off my chest. Something, and I must begin saying that I'm appalled, sad. It's really, I don't know, mad at the events that have been happening for the past year or so with all these liberals.
I'm sorry, with all these?
Liberals. And all these name calling. And to the point that they get nasty. And I'm sure you see it on TV. I see it on TV, public channel. They use the C word, they use the F word, they use the MF word, all sorts of words. And, we did, and you must be the king of proclamations and declarations and whatever, but we have never declared or proclaimed something that, let's try to stop this name calling. Let's be sociable. This nation was founded on different ideas. And just because you and I do not agree with, who is in charge, or you don't have to call me a name. You don't have to say or insult my grandkid or anything like that. Now, the actors are getting involved. I mean, the actors, out of all the people, those drug addicts, useless pieces of crap that they call they're rapists, and they are now...
Excuse me one second. There's one meeting in this room, please. If you need to talk, go outside. Thank you.
So these people are getting into the act now, and we are losing. I have to watch my grandkid when he watches TV, because this idiot, because he's a movie actor, thinks that he has the right to use the F word on public television, or the C word, to address a female. When do we draw the line? When do we say enough is enough? You know, I was saying you're the king of the proclamations and all that. It's nice to point out when somebody does a nice thing. But it's also, somebody should also tell these people, hey, you're going over the line, stop it. Just because you don't agree with me, just because you don't like the way I dress, just because you don't have to insult me. You don't have to, mention my family or anything like that. And it goes back to the roots of us as a nation. You know, it's funny, and I'm sure you heard me the other day, a couple of months ago, saying that the U.S., academically, we are 27th in the world. I'm surprised that we are that number. I don't know if anybody sees or is watching the World Cup. It's nice to see every nation, how they line up the players, and they sing, they listen to the national anthem, and they sing it with passion. Here in the U.S., we stick the finger, to the public, we pick the nose, we do anything other than pay attention and honor the ones that fought for our freedom. And it's like I said, I had to get it off my chest. Maybe we should do a proclamation saying, hey, enough is enough. You'll have your turn in the next election. The majority wins, majority rules. That's what any democratic society should be aiming for, and not this name calling. Stop it, it's just pathetic. Would you like it? It's just because if you and I do not agree on a subject that I address you, Mrs.
You know what? I agree with you, but my disagreement is it's not liberals, it's in general. So by focusing it on one side of a aisle or a political philosophy, I don't think is appropriate. I think it's wrong in general. I think we should have manners with each other. I think we should treat each other with respect. And Mr. Fernandez, it starts locally, and it starts in this chamber. I've been in the audience while I have seen people come up and address and say horrible things attacking people who sit up here. I've sat up here and had not very nice things said at me. We've had people come up and call us stupid at times. So I think we need to start with ourselves, and that we need to respect each other. I respect you and your opinions. We agree on some things, okay, a few things. And there are things we don't agree on, but I will always, always respect your right.
But at the end of the day, you go home and I go home, and I don't insult you or anything like that. That's where respect comes in. That's where class comes in. That's where...
But it's important to do it here, where children hear it, where other people, because it breeds.
But nobody ever even addressed the subject.
Well, I think we're addressing it right now by saying...
Because I'm bringing it up. I'm not the leader of this town.
Mr. Fernandez,
Enough.
you can stay at the floor because you brought the issue up. And that's, do council members have any comments or questions regarding Mr. Fernandez's comments? Mr. Fernandez, as I've seen you here many times before, have you ever been insulted by this governing board or felt like you were insulted by this governing board?
I didn't say that you did.
No, I'm just asking you, sir. You ask us questions so we can ask
I
you.
just brought it up
Right.
in
Well,
general.
I'm just saying, so have you ever been insulted by this governing board?
No.
Okay. We do our best at all times and try to set the mark to have the most respect to anyone who comes in these chambers and and requests the audience to speak on issues that they believe in, and also just to listen to general comments as you have done here. I think your sentiment is to have the mayor looking at doing a proclamation concerning language of
Saying something.
saying something of language
As
of
the leader of the township,
right on office holders that are higher up in office, I would imagine, is what you're looking at.
the leader of the township should take control and say, you know, this is not the same thing that we stigma-free and all these other things. Say, hey, look, this will not be allowed in this township. Like I said, it's nice to point out the nice things that this township, achieves, all the achievements. But it's also, if somebody goes out of line, he should be reprimanded and pointed out. Look, you went over the line. You insulted. You hurt his feelings.
Well, we thank you for your comments this evening. Thank you, sir.
Council President, if I may.
Yes.
My only comment is that while I am certainly, I share in Mr. Fernandez's sentiment as far as the name-calling has gotten to a point where it is absolutely ridiculous. But at the same time, as a mediocre scholar of the Constitution, I also realize there is an amendment which permits free speech to occur. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's something that I encourage. But there is a level of protection provided by the Constitution that allows individuals, and again, here throughout the entire country, their freedom of speech, so long as it doesn't cross a line where it turns into a threat or something of the sort. So again, I absolutely share in your sentiment, Mr. Fernandez. I'm happy to sit down and talk to you about something that can be done to lead a charge in this. I just think we need to be careful as far as what type of limits I try to place on anyone's speech, because I don't have the right to do that. So again, I'm happy to talk to you about this and come up with a plan that might help lead a charge, and I'm happy to talk to you about that.
The floor is open.
Hi, Bob Dombrowski, 3 Garden Street, and I apologize for having a conversation in the back. I'm going to get to my point after 1 second. Sometimes you have to practice what you preach, because you come up here, you said something about drug addicts. Well, I'm an addict. I got 18 years in recovery, alcoholic and drugs. I'm still an addict, and I will die an addict. So for somebody to come up here and preach all that and then put drug addict out there, it's wrong. You need to practice what you preach. I'm still in recovery, but I'm still an addict, and it's a daily struggle. So when you come up here and you talk, you need to pay attention.
Mr. Fernandez.
Okay?
It's not
That's why I put that on. Okay, thanks. The only question I have is on the redevelopment plan. Very simple one. As we add these particular structures, is there any money that we brought from the developers to upgrade our pump stations for the excess water that's coming through? Years ago, I brought up when there was a 2-family structure that's now Timco on the corner of South Grey Rock. There was a little stream back there. When they tore down that house, I brought it up, oh, we're going to put in this pipe, it's going to be, well, okay. 3 times since that's been built, especially during Irene, where Main Street has been undrivable through there, with the water coming through. My question, and also the additional sewage discharge. Not William and Lewis, it's Parkway Place to have submerged basements. When that river, actually before it floods, and it's bank full, downstairs in the basement, sinks, washers, that we have gate valves that have to be closed because it seeks its own level. Would there be, anything being addressed where, you come to that?
I'm sorry.
Closed in that flood zone. You couldn't do it after 11 o'clock news. You couldn't do it in the morning period because you could see that water coming up. I mean, would that be addressed as far as additional discharge of sewage and also aging pump stations?
Mr. Dombrowski, this evening the council is going to be approving, going to be approving a bill for $226,000 for Passaic Valley Water Sewage, so we know how expensive that is.
Yes.
As far as your question, you're alluding to the fact that through a development, is there going to be economic resources from that development giving to Little Falls to help in their plight of their sewer situation? At this time, That's going to be ongoing. I can't really answer
No.
that because there's going to be studies to that effect.
Yes.
And what that's going to mean.
No, I realize that. I just wanted to bring that point up.
Thank you.
To relieve my, okay,
Thank you. Thank you for your comments this evening. The floor is still open.
Good evening. My name is Victoria Calkins. I live at 32 Notch Park Road. I see that actually there's an agenda item. I doubt that my street is going to be on the resurfacing. But I wanted to come and call this matter to the attention of the council. Last year, Notch Park Road was resurfaced. And as a resident, I'm thrilled. There are approximately 30 homes on Notch Park Road. I'm guessing, if I round down, that it's about $360,000 annually in tax revenue. And while we were really grateful to have a newly resurfaced road, I'm wondering a little bit about the foresight of our planning insofar as PSE&G has ripped up this middle of this road to put a main in, which is fantastic as well. However, myself having been a consultant for an international management consulting firm, I can tell you that PSE&G did not come up with a plan to put the main in 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago. These things are usually on a 5-year projected plan. So where did we fall down in terms of connecting with PSE&G about their plans to put in a new gas main at the time that we were resurfacing our roads?
Thank you for your comments. Does the council have any questions or comments? Mayor?
So unfortunately, our DPW superintendent's not here this evening, who would have a little bit more insight into this. But as far as I understand it, they don't give us a 5-year projection on the lines that are going to be installed. We have the exact same issue this year on Morningside Circle. That road there were water mains installed not too long ago through the entire circle. As a part of that project, the water company paved for a majority of the road. The township contributed a very small dollar amount to finish that paving that year of the entire roadway. And unfortunately, PSE&G is coming through this year. They have ripped it up, and they're going to be repaving the entire roadway. So they don't provide us with a 5-year projection. It would be extremely helpful because we might be avoiding some of the streets that are on our list this year, knowing they're going to be torn up next year and PSE&G would be paying to replace them. We obviously wouldn't put them on our list. But public service, unfortunately, doesn't. They may internally have the 5-year projection, but they don't provide us with that information ahead of time, as far as I know, because you're right, it would be financially prudent to not pave a road this year that's going to be torn up next year and repaved. But unfortunately, we don't get that information. Otherwise, we would not be paving the roads that we know PS would be repaving the following year. To answer your question, I think it's an unsatisfactory answer in that I don't have a good answer for you because public service doesn't give us their projected list of when they're going to be doing the work.
So, I'm sorry, so do I understand that they're going to repave the entirety of the road as opposed to just a patch?
So our policy in the municipality that PSE&G follows is that if the roadway was resurfaced within the past 5 years, no matter what type of ditch work they do, they will replace the entire roadway.
Excellent. I mean, it's still too bad that we spend so much money
Without a
on
doubt.
tax dollars at work, and it's just a redundancy as opposed to a capital improvement. And it's a frustration. I'm happy that we're getting a new road, but I'm disappointed that I spend so much money on my tax dollars, and it's a redundancy.
There's also a large inconvenience to you living in the neighborhood that you have to put up with, so
Yes. Thank you.
the mayor's causing havoc. Yes, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Good, yourself?
Ani Karatkin, 181 Long Hill Road. Thanks. I was very impressed by the mayor's knowledge of constitutional law. For a minute, I thought he was a contender for the Supreme Court, but I know he wasn't on the Heritage Foundation list of contenders. I hope he wasn't on that list. But I have a question about, since the pavement of roads came up, a year ago there was approval for improvements on Donato Drive. The town got a Department of Transportation grant. It was roughly $600,000. What is the status of that road work? Is it being done? When is it being done? etc.
Right, so Mr. Crocken, you're alluding to the grant that we received, that we're going to be repaving and putting in Belgian block, not putting in the sidewalks on that, and you want to know the time frame to when that work is going to be started?
That would be helpful.
You know, Mr. We may, I don't know if we can answer it. Mr. Simone's not here this
But it's
evening.
still in a, it's still in a phase.
Oh, yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Without the sidewalks and removal.
With, correct. Yeah, we're moving forward. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you
So
have
we
any
still have
information,
the money.
Mayor?
Yeah, Council President, I planned on presenting to the council for August, the timeframe being the time to introduce the ordinance, to approve the expense to make the improvements. Following that, we'll have the bid package prepared, sent out for the entire road reconstruction.
So hopefully maybe this year.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Crocken. The floor is still open. Seeing no one else come forward, can I have a motion to close the meeting to the public?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. We're going to move into action items. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the correspondence item at this time?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Mrs. Kraus, please call the roll.
Councilmember Coordinator?
Yes.
Councilmember Lees?
Yes.
Councilmember Sieber,
Yes.
Councilmember Vanchery?
Yes.
Council President Scoba.
Yes. Mrs. Kraus, can you please read the correspondence?
Request from Little Falls Biz for permission to use the Morris Canal area to hold its annual Fall Festival on Sunday, September 23rd, 2015, from 12 p.m. until 5 p.m.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution A at this time?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Kraus, please call the roll.
Councilmember Coordinator?
Yes.
Councilmember Lees?
Yes.
Councilmember Sieber,
Yes.
Councilmember Vanchery?
Yes.
Council President Scoba.
Yes. Mayor?
We do.
It's the mic. He's got to move.
Thank you, Council President. We have two things on the list this evening. The first being the proposed dog ordinance revision. I was proposing that this council make some minor modifications to the current dog ordinance. There's often times when individuals are playing with their dogs during the day outside, and the dogs are barking. There were some complaints lodged, and I believe that the ordinance right now improperly penalizes individuals in town who may be playing with their dogs during the day. So some of the changes that I was looking to propose to this council is that we make the barking of the animals a violation during our hours in which our noise ordinance currently comes into effect, which is from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., so that individuals can play with their dogs during the day without the fear of being ticketed for doing so. The exception to that would be that dogs cannot be barking while unattended, and that essentially what that means is that no person shall leave a dog unattended during the day, which would be habitually barking or crying, because that would still remain a violation. And part of that was and part of the intention there again is to avoid the issue of people having dogs while home, playing with them, and them barking while playing, and receiving violations for that. That is the proposed dog ordinance revision. And the second is the tax refund resolution. And this resolution, essentially, the cliff noted version of that is if there is a business in town that owes the municipality tax dollars and they are simultaneously owed a tax refund, the township does not actually provide them with the refund. It just applies that refund towards the delinquent taxes that are currently owed. And that's what this resolution being proposed does. It essentially retains the funds that the municipality already has that are technically due back to the taxpayer because they have a delinquency that exceeds the amount due to them.
Does council members have questions concerning item number 1 or item number 2?
I have a question.
Councilwoman Coordinator?
So I just have a little bit of concern on the wording. First of all, it seems...
On which?
Well, okay, I'm sorry, it's the dog. So when I look at no person shall leave a dog unattended, which habitually barks or cries, and no person shall keep, harbor, or maintain a dog which habitually barks or cries while unattended. So it's very subjective. Who decides? Maybe a neighbor doesn't like dogs and a dog has barked 4 times and they make a complaint. Or they just want to do something against the neighbor. You know, dogs get let out at night at 10:30 or 11. I know I think my neighbors like it when a car is pulled up or somebody's walking past their house and my dog barks, saying that I'm watching the area. So I'm concerned that it's too subjective for whoever comes, when their complaint is lodged. And the wording about no person shall own, keep, or harbor or maintain any dog. So what happens? We're going to take the dog away? It's very broad, and that makes me nervous. We all know I'm a dog fanatic, so.
So I think to address some of your concerns, Councilwoman, the key to a dog barking when a car pulls up in your driveway, that dog would not be habitually barking. That dog is a dog who barked at in one incident that occurred. Habitually barking is nonstop, and you're right, it is subjective. Just like much of the language that is focused towards law enforcement. For example, a disorderly person's event. What makes a person disorderly? While one person may believe that person was not acting disorderly, a dozen may believe that person was. So you're right, there is there is a lot of subjectiveness to the ordinance. The issue here was that the current ordinance, which most of this encompasses with some minor revision, is, I think, far more subjective. Right. And the intent of this is to hone in and narrow down a little bit some of the issues that have been brought to my attention and some of the councilperson's attentions over the past several months. So to answer your question, yes, it is still subjective.
Can we put a time for, like, the dog has barked for 10 minutes or something that gives it a little bit more of a leeway, and just so we don't have any of that neighbor trying to be difficult to neighbor kind of thing?
If I can, Mayor, I had something to say.
No, I think
It's me.
I think it's the mic.
Okay.
Oh, this one's off.
It's on?
Councilwoman, I'm a municipal prosecutor in another jurisdiction, and I often have these type of cases involving dogs and licenses.
Your press.
Various issues. And I only highlight this for this reason, that obviously when someone is summoned for this, they do go before the municipal court. There is a process by which that person has an appeal right, in essence, to be heard before the judge, and certainly to have the matter reviewed by the prosecutor. So there's several layers that have to go, this type of complaint goes through. You have to give and my only 2 cents on this, and if need be, if instructed by council and mayor, I'll take a look at this for constitutionality purposes, because you have to walk a fine line here between giving your animal control personnel the appropriate authority, but you don't want to make it utterly subjective and therefore almost, quite frankly, unenforceable. I don't know if that's the case here, but obviously that's the line you have to tread. You have to give some degree of flexibility with regard to these matters. And obviously, when and if these type of summonses come up, the individual will have the right to go before the judge and have their matter heard. So it's not as if this is a fiat.
On the third offense, as I read.
Right. There is a process. When enforcement comes down, there is a process by which that person has an appeal right. So I don't want to give the impression that this happens without that appeal right.
And Councilwoman, just to clarify, you can appear in court on either the first or second violation as well. It's just not mandatory. So an appearance, you can either pay the penalty on a first offense of $50 without appearing in court. The same for the second offense with a $100 penalty without being required to appear. It does not mean that you don't have the right to appear and raise an objection.
Can I then just ask maybe counsel to investigate something where things should be equal? And I may be incorrect about this ordinance. We have a noise ordinance. And I don't believe, I could be wrong, that when there's a complaint and the police come, there's no summons given the first time, and there's no, at least that's been my experience. So I just want them to be equal types of punishment.
So the police have every right to issue the ticket if it was warranted. I do know oftentimes generally speaking, their first approach is to disarm the situation and do away with the noise. And our health department does have a decibel reader to determine whether or not that volume is over the certain decibel level that's required to result in a violation. And again, similarly, the subjectiveness of the two sort of go hand in hand.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize to the audience and those watching us live with the problem with the microphones. We'll work on that issue. I do want to also call the attention, it's 2015 that the Little Falls Biz has permission. It's a typo, 2018, not 2015, as stated in the agenda. Mr. Cuccio, you want to talk about the liquor license transfer, please? Okay, Mrs. Kraus, you would like to talk about the liquor transfer?
A person-to-person liquor license application has been filed for the Greystone Inn, and all paperwork and fees have been submitted, so that has been forwarded to the state of New Jersey for review, and we hope to have this before the council for a hearing and approval at the next meeting.
Does council have any questions regarding this? Mayor, would you like to review the road resurfacing street program, please?
Sure, Council President. Would you like me to name the streets?
Absolutely.
All right, so there, our DPW superintendent, as he does each year, one of his tasks is to, during the course of the year while traversing the town, to come up with a list and determine the roads that are most in need of resurfacing based on a number of factors. Of course, the general condition of the middle of the roadway being one of the largest ones. And this year's streets that are being proposed for road resurfacing are Ryle Ave from Patterson Ave down to Cedar Street, Cedar Street from Jackson Street to the north dead end, Willow Ave from Cedar Street to Harrison Street. And those streets are ones that are being dug up by public service. And essentially what we did this year is we entered into a sort of trade-off deal with PSE&G. Public services policy in the municipality, as I indicated, when a road has been resurfaced in 5 years, is to resurface it from side to side the entire length of the repair. If the road is in excess of 5 years, they only repave the one half of the road that has been dug up. And personally, I know it was done a couple of years ago. Aesthetically, I don't like how it looks. I know the council shares in that sentiment. It's kind of a weird design when you have the skunk look down the street with a white stripe and a black stripe. So what we've done this year is sort of trade off with PSE&G down in the Patterson, Jackson, Cedar area of town, where they are repaving the entire roadway on a number of the streets that they did dig up. The municipality intends to repave the rest of the streets that they dug up from side to side, so that those streets, which are in need of repaving anyway, get resurfaced from side to side rather than just 50% of it. So that was sort of the trade-off on those 3 streets. The other streets that are being proposed for resurfacing this year are Inwood Drive from Long Hill Road through the entire cul-de-sac. What's being proposed is that the small island in the middle actually be paved as part of the circle. There was a large tree in the middle of that island a number of years, actually until recently, that came down in one of the storms. Now it is sort of a no man's land island, and turning around in that cul-de-sac, there's actually no parking permitted in that cul-de-sac now because of how narrow it is due to that island. So the plan is to remove that current island, pave that area so that the residents could have some additional parking down there if they have guests over. The other streets are Grove Street from Woodhall Ave to the dead end, Sindel Ave from Van Ness down to Peckman Road. And the rest of these that are being still somewhat up for some discussion are Dewey Ave from Railroad to Wood Street, Hobson Ave from East Main all the way down to including the cul-de-sac, River Boulevard from Main Street to Woodcliff Ave, and the next 6 streets, depending on the amount of funding that goes into the ones that have already been listed, are the lower priority for this year, because as you know, we allocate $300,000 a year towards road resurfacing. Our Taylor Ave from Main Street to Woodcliff Ave, 2nd Ave from Wilmore Road to Cedar Grove line, Douglas Drive from Cedar Grove Road to Brook Court, the dead end to and including the cul-de-sac, Reiner's Road, which starts at Cedar Grove Road down to and including the cul-de-sac, and Mozart Street, Clarence Ave to Pleasant Ave. Those are the streets that are being proposed. Those last 6, again, depending on the price of gas, which is a major factor in how much the asphalt costs, will determine whether or not we get through the entire list or whether or not the last few on that list don't make the road resurfacing list, the final list this year.
Thank you, Mayor. Mrs. Kraus, would you make sure we have some copies inside your office for the public if they deemed, if they didn't get all those streets, that they come in, they could come in and get a copy. Councilwoman Seaver.
Thank you. So, being a part of the Municipal Alliance Committee, we had at the July 4th Street Fair a booth set up that was manned by members of the Municipal Alliance, and we were able to hand out signs and literature about parents, who host the most, lose the most, keeping your kids drug and alcohol free. We were very well attended at that booth, so it was a really great time had by all, so thank you.
Councilwoman Cordonier.
I have nothing to report.
Councilman Lees.
Just nothing, very quickly. The other day I was in the recreation center, and it was a day when little children were there, older children, and I was impressed with the fact that everyone was being taken care of well, and students up to the 8th grade did a great job in working with other children, and I was impressed with how this is getting ready for the summer meetings and programs there. And it's something that we have that a lot of other towns don't have, and I was very pleased with what I saw. Okay.
Councilman Vanchery.
Sure, I just have a couple things. After our last meeting, the Transportation Committee had a chance to go over some of the agenda items that we were looking to discuss with the mayor, as well as council president, members of the Little Falls Police Department, DPW Director Simone, and also our BA, Mr. Cuccia. So we had a good discussion when we met a day later with everyone, where we talked about coming up with a plan to address some of the concerns, as I mentioned earlier, where residents have been utilizing social media as well as reaching out to members of the council and the mayor about some of the concerns with speeding. So we made it a point to make sure that moving forward, we're addressing the concerns as they come through, and that we work with the police department so that they can look into any of the requests that come through. For example, with your street, now you know that Corporal Mancato and Lieutenant Briggs are going to look into it, and they will probably reach out to you, and there may be a study at some point that's being done. So that was one area of concern, because we saw the feedback from people where the concern is speeding. So let's see what we can look into. The other thing that we talked about too was addressing some of the concerns from the county. Unfortunately, a few months ago, the committee met with members of the county's traffic engineer team, and we were moving forward on a couple of items, including getting an update on the 25-mile-per-hour speeding throughout town, except for a few roads, including Route 23, and then also the possibility of adding a traffic light at the corners of Wilmore, Francisco, and Cedar Grove Road. We haven't heard back from the county. Several of us have reached out, so we've talked to the mayor as well as Mr. Cuccia about really, hunkering down and going to the county and saying, hey, can you guys give us an update? So that's something we wanted to acknowledge and make sure that's addressed. The other thing, too, that we're looking into, and Corporal Mancato's pulling together a report for DPW Director Simone, is canvassing the entire streets around town to determine if there's any signage that's missing, whether it's a stop sign, whether it's the street sign, or if there's additional signs that need to be added, whether it's a narrow bend or if it's like low hill. We just want to make sure that we're addressing any concerns that come through, and we've noticed that there are certain things that are missing in town, so that's something that we're working on. And the same thing too with any signs that are fading or the lettering you can't really read. There's some where you go on some streets, do not enter is just a white sign now. So we want to, just be on top of those little things. So Corporal Mancato's pulling together that report, and then we'll work with the DPW to make sure that we address everything to that point. The other thing too, based on our discussion, is that we wanted to make sure the dialogue keeps going. And so every other month, we're going to have these check-in meetings with the mayor, the council president, our BA, DPW director, and the police department to make sure that when we sit there in these meetings, we have a list of items that need to get done, they're being addressed. And if they're not being addressed, how can we get it done? So that it doesn't lag on for a long period of time, because I think we all hear the concerns, and we want to make sure things are getting done. So our next meeting with the whole group will be in August. Our next transportation meeting will be later this month on July 30th, so hopefully we'll have some more updates to share.
Thank you, council members, for your report. Mayor, I do want to comment on the street fair that it was great to see our police chief on his bike and the presence of our officers, and as well as the cleanup by the organization and by the DPW staff. It was really spotless the next day, and that was very impressive. Can I have a motion and a second to open to public comment for agenda items only?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to this motion signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Mrs. Kraus?
Anyone wishing to address the Township Council may do so through the Council President. Please give your name and address for the record. Comments are to be limited to 3 minutes. However, if appropriate, you may be granted additional time in the sole discretion of the Council President.
The floor is open. See no one come forward. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Dombrowski.
Yeah, I just got one question. I know the chief isn't here. Concerning the dog ordinance, do we know how many summonses were actually issued in the last couple of years? And is it up to the discretion of the officer? Because me, as being a dog, and I know it is frustrating. We have a dog in the neighborhood, it just barks, and unfortunately, they're in the shower. It is frustrating at times. Is there any way we could get a number for that? You know, how many people have actually been, you know, because it's a, or how many were issued by the department, and how many were issued actually by a citizen's complaint? Because some neighbors don't like dogs, and if your some dogs look aggressive. I'm just curious, being an animal lover. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. We'll look into how many summonses were issued, and also to answer your question, it is a police discretion anytime summonses are given. Okay, thank you, sir. You don't have to repeat your address, Mr. Crockett.
I'm still there. You can buy me out and I'll move. I have a question about, I think it's commendable that every year we talk about resurfacing of streets. And as someone who believes in transparency and citizen participation, I bring back the issue of what happened on Donato Drive when there were plans to resurface and residents came and expressed concern. While it's commendable that the DPW superintendent comes up with a list, my question is, are residents consulted, advised, their input asked for? In particular, what struck me when we talk about Inwood Road, even though the mayor, Inwood Drive, said that the island with the tree, the tree came down. Well, did you ask, maybe some residents want a tree put back? Maybe they find the island charming. Are we making decisions for residents without their input? And that's my concern vis-a-vis the process of selecting what streets for resurfacing.
Mr. Crockett, concerning Donato Drive, I think the main concern of those residents was not the paving, but was the sidewalks to that particular issue. But answering as far as do we do a focus group or go out and ask every resident, say, hey, we're going to repave your street. Do you have a concern? And I'll let the mayor weigh in on this as well. The answer to that is no. It's by the superintendent, who knows the roads better than anyone, Mr. Simone in this town, who has his crew reporting back to him, and he does the inspections himself to determine what roads. Now, he has asked if there's a particular road that would maybe move around for a particular reason, but all the time, it's really up to the superintendent to give the recommendation on the roads.
My concern, though, is in the example with Donato Drive, that a plan was made, and it was when the residents came, they seemed to inform both the superintendent and the town planner that those houses were built on a high floodplain, they had no basements, they were built on slabs like Levittown, and there was danger of flooding. But yet, initially, before they came in mass, had they not been here, you would have gone ahead and put in sidewalks without consulting the people about how they see their neighborhood. What issues do they see that Phil Simone may not be aware of?
Mr. Crockett, that was a road reconstruction project, which is far different from a road resurfacing project. Road resurfacing is simply milling and repaving of the existing roadway. Road reconstruction included Belgian block infrastructure, so it included curbing, sidewalk, infrastructure upgrades, far more monumental than just the resurfacing.
But it was selected in the same process, that Phil Simone made, they were on a list that he created.
No, it's an entirely
right.
separate process. That was an NJDOT grant that was applied for, which was a very different process than just using our own funds to resurface. To answer your question on Inwood Drive, though, I've actually spoken to 3 of the, I think there's about 7 homes on Inwood, all of whom were, the 3 that I were able to touch base with were in favor of it. Mr. Simone mentioned to me, he reached out to me and inferred whether or not we should remove the island that was in the middle, or if we should leave it there. And when he did reach out to me, I actually had a phone number for 2 of the people on Inwood Drive. One of those people spoke to a 3rd individual on the street, all of whom got back to me and said that they were in favor of the island being removed for the reasons that I stated, that right now, typically School 2 becomes their parking lot, or they need to go up to Villa Road or one of the surrounding areas. So they were in favor of having the island removed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Crocken, if you may just stay there a moment. Does the council have any questions or comments concerning the comments of Mr. Crocken?
I do.
Councilwoman Cordonier?
I appreciate your need for transparency and, holding the mayor and council accountable for transparency. I think that's an important thing to do. I do believe, and I'm not going to remember the exact meeting, but after the meeting with the residents from Donato Drive and a follow-up meeting, I do believe the mayor made a statement about the process of which, when it's something like a reconstruction or something that is more impactful other than just simple milling, that residents will be advised with an appropriate amount of time and that there would be ongoing transparency, and that he was committed to that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor.
Actually, yes, Councilwoman, that's absolutely true. Actually, even with the resurfacing, much like I did during last year's, every street that is going to be resurfaced, I will prepare a letter and send it to every single of the households. One of the intents of that letter is to advise them that if they are intending on having, say they have oil now and want to switch to natural gas, the time to do that is now, so that the road does not need to be dug up, a month after it is paved, with a hole that never seems to be as flat as the roadway originally was. So we asked them to take care of those things sooner rather than later, because after the road is repaved, there's a period of time that we don't allow them to open up unless it's an emergency.
I thank you, and thank you, Councilwoman Coordinator, for pointing that out. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments this evening, Mr. Crocken. The floor is open, ma'am. You have to repeat your name.
It's Janice Sherman, Woods Road. I'm not from Inwood, but it caught my curiosity now that the parking lot is going to be at the bottom of School 2. Is parking an issue on Inwood? Like taking out that island?
I could
know what I
jump.
mean?
Hold on one
We were
second.
addressing about the parking for School 2. Everybody uses that street, but now that they're making the parking lot at the bottom of School 2, is Inwood still an issue?
No, this is more, my comment was more related to the homeowners when they have guests over on a weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's only a couple of spots in the straight portion, the
Right.
portion without the cul-de-sac, where their guests are able
really
to park.
like the cul-de-sac, but I don't live there, so.
They indicated that they, if it were like any other cul-de-sac, people would be able to kind of park around that as well.
Right.
And they'd be able to add another handful of spots. So my comment was not related to anything having to do with the school. I'm sure for that reason, they wouldn't. I wonder, theoretically, if the parking lot was not going in, if they would be as thrilled to have the island removed. And I would venture to say probably not, because there would be more cars there than for school. But with the parking lot going on, it seems that they're more receptive to having additional parking there for friends, more so than, again, for school drop-off.
Does the council have any questions?
I was just going to add too, because what happens around that cul-de-sac, and I have a few friends that live over there on that street, and they kind of circle it and then picking up the kids all the time. What happens is people end up parking on the grass because you can't literally park around the cul-de-sac, otherwise you can't get around. And what would happen is, say in the morning for drop-offs and then in the afternoons for pickup, people would be stuck around that circle waiting for someone to come back to their car so that they can get around. So that's why it's been a challenge. And you'll see people will literally go on the grass. But now that one house on the corner of the cul-de-sac, it looks like it's sold now, it's being worked on and everything else. So it's a little insane, because towards the end of the year when they had the clap out for the kids, all of their trucks were there too and cars couldn't get around the cul-de-sac. So it's very tight.
Would anyone else like to come forward? Seeing no one else come forward, can I have a motion to close the meeting to the public?
So moved.
Second?
I second.
All those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Can I have a motion and a second to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. This meeting is now closed.